Thanks for the organizers, and thanks for everybody for attending. I'll talk about finding and characterizing the first isolated stellar mass black hole with microlensing. So just want to do a cartoon overview of what I think we're trying to understand this conference. And so, throughout the last couple of days, people have talked about the ingredients for understanding the life cycle of stellar mass black holes, from the progenitor systems to all the complex physics that happens in interactions and disruptions and things like that. And the final things we see, the remnants themselves. And so what I'm going to focus on is the isolated systems, because as was mentioned earlier, even though we think most of the progenitors are in binaries, we expect a lot of them to effectively become single black holes in the end, because either these binaries merge or they are very wide binaries and will be easily disrupted, either in the formation of the black hole or the neutron star. Okay. And so, I'll talk about this one isolated stellar mass black hole we've detected. And the origin of this detection is actually a funny story. We went into this expecting to find 0 black holes. And so this is because we're looking through an archival data set that was taken over 10 years ago. And originally, it was analyzed by the team that had taken this data. They selected 5 black hole candidates from ground-based surveys. These are the light curves from those surveys, the MOA survey and the OGLE survey. They got HST follow-up astrometric measurements and tried and measured the masses of these objects. And they concluded that there were no black hole candidates in there, didn't publish it, moved on, and started a new sample. But we're really interested in not just detecting an isolated stellar mass black hole, we're interested in population statistics. And non-detections, although they are not as constraining as a detection, are still important. And if you don't find anything, that might say something interesting. And again, all data is precious. HST is really hard to get good astrometry with. And so we went and analyzed these objects to try and build up our sample statistics and what we could do with non-detections. So indeed, the first 4 objects I'm showing here, we confirmed are not black holes, most likely white dwarfs or just regular main sequence stars. But this last object we found actually had a mass that was higher than 3 solar masses, which is indicative of a potential black hole companion, black hole, and we didn't see any evidence of light. And so it's a very good black hole candidate. So what we did was we got additional HST observations to extend our temporal baseline in order to measure better the astrometric signal. As Jessica and Peter talked about, the signal is very long, and so having this longer time baseline enabled us to get a better measurement of the mass. And so, okay, here are the data of 110462, which is the first isolated stellar mass black hole. So on the top, I'm showing the astrometric measurements and the model, and the bottom is the photometry. So you'll see on the top, RA versus time and DEC versus time. There are data points in 2 different colors. These are the HST astrometry, which was taken in 2 different filters. That's what's red and blue. And they agree, which is good, because microlensing is an achromatic signal. The microlensing model, best fit, is in black, and then posterior samples are in gray. And you can see this signal is very small. The y-axis is the signal in milliarc seconds. The maximum signal is only about a milliarc second and a half. And so this is enabled by HST's incredible astrometric precision, where for each measurement, if you do all the dithering correctly, you get precisions of 0.2 to 0.3 milliarc seconds. And the bottom is showing the light curve. Blue is the OGLE data. There's a lot of data points, so it's a little bit hard to see, but it's excellent time coverage. And then the HST data from space also matches that. And so when you jointly model these 2 data sets together, you can derive the mass of the lens, you can derive its distance, and as well as its proper motion. And so if you have the proper motion and the distance, you can convert that into a physical transverse velocity. And so we find that's a 6 solar mass object, about less than 2 kiloparsecs away from Earth, with a transverse velocity about 40 kilometers per second. Okay, and so I'll also note that other people have analyzed this object, and we're all basically in agreement on these parameters. And so I would consider this a solid detection. And so, okay, what can we do with this information of this mass and velocity of one object? So Megna Gomez and Ramirez Ruiz, they looked at the mass of black holes you would expect formed from rapid binary population synthesis, and what they call binary origin isolated black holes that form from, for example, disruptions or mass transfers, tended to be less massive. than black holes that were effectively single origin, where there were no interactions. And so because of fallback, you tend to get more massive black holes. And so based on a mass argument alone, they conclude that 0462 is more likely to have originated in a binary system. And Andrews and Vicky Calagera used kinematic information to try and determine the formation origin. And so what they did was, if you have the velocities now, you can integrate orbits back in time and figure out where this object was initially born. And so they found also, based on that, this object could not have gotten a very large kick, at most about 100 kilometers per second. And whether it was actually up, all the way up to that limit, or somewhat lower, depends on whether it originated in the thin or thick disk. But this is how we can use the mass and velocity information we get from microlensing of isolated objects to probe the formation of isolated black holes. Looking now a little bit broader into the population of microlensing black holes, 0462 is unusual, as Peter alluded to. And so the reason for this, I'm going to attribute mostly to selection effects. So this is the pi e versus TE distribution, where black holes tend to live in the lower right corner, because this pi e parameter is proportional to 1 over the square root of the mass, and TE is proportional to the square root of the mass. So more massive in that corner. And so 0462 seems to have a somewhat unusually large microlensing parallax pi e. That's because this parameter, pi e, is not only dependent on the mass of the lens, but also how close it is to us, this relative parallax. And so if you have a relative parallax that is large, it's closer, that makes it easier to detect because the astrometric signal is also larger. And so part of this is just the first object you detect is usually a weirdo, and it's hard to detect astrometric shifts. So the fact that it's close makes it easier to detect. And so, you know, it's unusual, but I think we expect that just based on selection effects. And so that's, you know, a little bit hand-wavy on selection effects. I want to be a little bit more rigorous now and actually get into the sample selection constraints that we talked about to derive population statistics. So Jessica showed this plot earlier of the crossing time distribution of black hole, of all types of lenses, including black holes. On the right, I'm showing a similar version of this plot, except now this is at some given crossing time scale, the fractional contribution of these different types of lenses. And so what you'll see in the red is that as you get to longer time scales, black holes contribute a larger fraction of those events. And so you need to account for that in your selection and to determine how likely you are to get a black hole in your sample. And so from the simulation, the input is there's 2 times 10 to the 8 black holes. We can use a Poisson binomial distribution, which is like a success or no success distribution experiment with n independent trials. And so what we can say is we have 5 independent trials because we had 5 objects. We can determine what the probability that we should have detected success or no success based on our simulation, the selection effect being the time scale. And then the result we're going to compare to is how many black holes we detected. Okay, so this is the histogram. Probability of success we calculate using the simulations. So success probability is you can have 0 to 5 black holes in a sample of 5 objects. And you'll see that the probability of having between anywhere from 0 to 2 or 3 black holes is consistent with this prediction of 2 times 10 to the 8 stellar mass black holes in the Milky Way. And so, you know, we detect one object, it is consistent. You know, this is a little bit, it's kind of a silly, it looks a little bit silly, but it's because we only have 5 objects. But this is a proof of concept that this is something we can do with the Roman Space Telescope. We'll do much better. And also, part of it is because, you know, these 5 candidates, most of them were actually not very constraining. If I show this plot again, you'll see a lot of these objects had they're long compared to the typical timescale of 20 days. But in the grand scheme of what we expect for the black hole fraction, most of them had like a less than 10% chance of being a black hole in the first place. So really, these 2 detections are driving most of the constraint. And so, you know, we have detected the first isolated stellar mass black hole. We can measure its properties. You can start and try and infer the formation of these objects based on these properties. We can characterize selection effects. And, you know, with one system, we've proven we can do it. I think that's important. But we're really looking forward to the Roman Space Telescope. This is my Roman propaganda. We can measure the masses and velocities of hundreds stellar mass black holes, and this will really enable us to actually answer the questions that we are interested in about their formation. Okay, thank you. Happy to take questions.
Hans-Walter Briggs, NPI. Casey, beautiful stuff. In light of what Jessica's pointed out this morning, that who knows whether it's actually isolated or could be a binary. For this particular case at hand, does the isolated represent your prior at the time or actually evidence?
Right. So in the simulation, it is effectively a prior because that's what we put in. The evidence in terms of the analysis is that if you look at the light curve, there doesn't seem to be evidence of binarity. In the astrometry, we don't have a ton of, I'll show you the coverage one more time. It's got that many points. And so if the companion, if there's, say, a binary companion very far away, that could potentially be a binary. But based on the also constraints from the light curve, it's very high magnification that tells you about whether or not there could be a companion nearby. And so companions up to about 10% of the mass of this lens, so like low mass solar star, are ruled out to within about 200 AU. So it could be a binary, but it'd be a very, very, very wide binary at most.
My question is about selection criteria. The 5 events that you show were first selected by Carlos Sarko, but do you really understand what were the selection criteria, the timescales, or
right?
Do you know that?
Yeah, so they were selected to be long duration, but in the end, it doesn't necessarily matter what they intended to select on. What matters is what the duration actually is, and so we have captured that in this selection. And so we're assuming that this time scale is, this is what the selection, like how likely it is to be a black hole, is encoded in that information. And so once you've measured it, you then know your selection. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Thanks. So you mentioned it's kind of a unusually large astrometric signal. Is that true even after you do the selection on, how long of a duration it was and the other things that went into the selection function? Like when you make your histogram in the model, or do most of these have smaller astrometric signals?
Yeah, so I don't have a plot for this, but because of the distance effect, most of them will have smaller astrometric signals just because they're farther away.
Thanks.
I'll ask a leading question. Are there prospects for detecting more between now and Roman?
Indeed, there's other people looking at other candidates. So would you like to elaborate? Well, there's samples with Keck, and so there's also some very interesting candidates followed up with HST that are in the works. So stay tuned for those papers.
So is it impossible to do some of the astrometry from the ground with adaptive optics?
You can. Some people are doing that.
Weather is a problem. It's
Yeah.
time domain. Good. Any other questions?
I don't know if I'm allowed to deviate from the massive black holes, but what was very briefly the status on lower mass objects that are lensing?
Oh, sorry.
I have not been following this. So how many detections do we have of lower mass objects?
Lower mass objects. You mean like sorry, I didn't understand. Non-black holes. So you can do this in principle with any type of lens, but because the mass is lower, then it just makes the signal even smaller, and so it makes it harder to detect.
Are there undisputed detections at the moment?
Undisputed detection. So for some of these, we have like, I didn't show the non-detections because they were not black holes, but we can detect the astrometric signal of non-black holes.
So the ones so far are mostly upper limits on the masses. There's a white dwarf that's been measured, and very nearby, white dwarf 10 parsecs, Kailash, who has that one. So that's about it so far. All right, let's thank Casey again.